expected points, clean sheet odds, and who is the best captain. This video has got all of the information you need to know ahead of Game Week 22. We're going to start off then by looking at some expected points data for goalkeepers. All of this expected points data is courtesy of Fantasy Football Hub. You can sign up to Fantasy Football Hub using the golden goal link in the description. I get you 30 days of a free trial and 30% off signing up. So if you want to check out this data for yourself to use for your own team, use the link in the description. So for goalkeepers, we've currently got a three-way tie for the top goalkeeper for Game Week 22, with Sanchez, Sells, and David Raya leading the way. Sanchez with Wolves at home, Sells with Southampton at home. I mean, what a great fixture that is for Nottingham Forest. If there was ever a nailed-on clean sheet, you've got to think it's that one, which means they probably concede. But that looks like certainly a good fixture for him. And David Raya with Aston Villa at home. Alisson, Pickford, Ward, and Kinski, obviously the new goalkeeper for Tottenham, are your top keepers just for Game Week 22. Now, if you're looking to bring in a goalkeeper, I reckon you should do so, or any player for that matter in FPL, I reckon you should do so with more than just a one game week ahead view in mind. So what I've done here is put together a list of the top goalkeepers for expected points for the next 5 game weeks to give you a view of who is better longer term. And you'll see a bit of a trend here with Liverpool and Everton players. Because of that double game week in Game Week 24, it really pushes them up the ranks in terms of, top players for expected points. But you kind of expect that. They've got one extra fixture over the next 5 game weeks than other players do. So Alisson and Pickford, according to Fantasy Football Hub, are your top goalkeepers for the next 5, followed by David Raya, Kinski of Spurs, Martinez, Sells, and Leno. I said this at the start of the season. A player that's not on here is Onana. The Man United fixtures are turning. They're pretty good for the next 5 game weeks. And I have said on quite a few of my videos that I have backed from the beginning of the season Onana to be the top scoring goalkeeper come the end of the season. And I still, with the exception of Sells, I think Sells is probably his main threat, and Pickford as well to overtake him and beat him. But I still do think that Onana is a decent goalkeeper pick. But if I were to pick a goalkeeper right now to have in my team, I think I'd have to say Sells. With the way Nottingham Forest are playing defensively, the way he is playing as well, the amount of saves he's making, 4.9 million I still think is a really good price for him. For me, I think Sells is the outstanding goalkeeper in the game, despite what these expected points say. I know Alisson and Pickford have both got double game weeks, so you have to kind of factor that into your decision making, I suppose. And one thing I would say about Alisson, he might be number 1 on this list, but I don't think I've said this in many of my videos. He just feels a little bit injury prone now. I don't know why, but he seems every season he picks up 1 or 2 injury, and Kelleher plays sort of double-digit games. And I'd worry if I had Alisson that an injury was coming soon, just with the way it's gone for him recently. So yeah, those are my thoughts and the top goalkeepers for the next 5. On to defenders then, and for Game Week 22 in isolation, the top defender for expected points is Gabriel. However, I really think the Forest defenders for me are the standouts, and you can see there, they're not quite top for expected points, but they're right up there. Southampton at home, I think, is just such a good fixture for Forest. I mean, Southampton are pretty much the worst team they are the worst team in the league, let's be honest. And no surprise to see Milenkovic, Neco Williams, Aina and Murillo all towards the top for expected points. Trent's up there as well. I still probably think, pound for pound, Trent is probably the best defender in the game. We haven't seen the best of Trent, I'll admit, in the last month or so, whether those rumours of him potentially moving to Real Madrid or affecting his performances for Liverpool. Didn't have a great game against Forest in Game Week 21, but I still rank him up there as one of the top defenders, especially when he's got that double game week coming up. Other players to note, Gabriel, he's up there as well as best defenders in the game. I would say both Arsenal and Liverpool have kind of dropped off a little bit defensively, to be fair, but both Trent and Gabriel just have so much attacking threat, and so does Guardiola as well. He's near the top of this list with Ipswich away. Genuinely, every time I see Guardiola play, he looks like he has a chance of scoring, whether that's, bombing down the wing and having a chance with a shot, or just getting on the end of a cross or something with a late run. Just every time I see him play, he's got a chance for goal. So even if you don't believe Man City are going to keep clean sheets, he's the top scoring defender in the game for goals scored this season with 4. That's more than any other defender. So yeah, I mean, he's still a good option, I think, until at least the Man City fixtures turn. Okay then, for the next 5 game weeks, it's not a real surprise to see Liverpool defenders dominating with that double they've got in Game Week 24. So the order goes Trent, Robertson, Gabriel, Virgil van Dijk, Konate, Saliba and Guardiola. Now, I've spoken about pretty much all of these players so far, but one player that is emerging of interest, particularly with Quansah and Gomez with their injuries, is Konate. At 5.1 million, you've got a route into that Liverpool defence that probably plays both games of the double and pretty much every other game around it. And he's significantly cheaper than the rest of the Liverpool defenders. So I think I'd probably rank Trent as my number 1. Van Dijk probably as my number 2, just because Robertson has dropped a little bit this season in terms of form. We're seeing Tsimikas get good minutes. Obviously, Tsimikas got the assist against Forest. I worry that Robertson could be displaced from that 11 more times than you'd be comfortable with, particularly during that double. I'm not sure if he plays both games of the double. So I don't think I could rank him as 3rd. I think Konate is the 3rd best. And, you know, that's not considering his price. You probably, you know, considering he's, nearly 1.5 million cheaper than Virgil van Dijk. If I was a buying man, I'd probably go for Konate in my team ahead of Van Dijk at the moment, just considering the injury situation across the Liverpool defence. Yeah, just an interesting thought there on Konate. Now, that defender view we saw for the next 5 game weeks was pretty much dominated by premium defenders, right? Mostly 5 million or above. So what I've done here is a list of similar expected points, but for cheap defenders. And one interesting point in there was Luca Dean. He's really favoured by Fantasy Football Hub, and you can see I put a picture of him on the slide, but I'm not too sure about his minutes, I'll be honest. I'm not sure I could go for Luca Dean. Konate, I sort of class him as a cheap defender at 5.1 million. Got Munoz up there. No surprise to see him towards the top. He and Lewis Hall, I think. In fact, Lewis Hall doesn't actually make this list, which is quite surprising. But both Munoz and Lewis Hall, I would class as probably the 2 best sub 5 million defenders. Yes, Lewis Hall's not on this list, but that's my opinion compared to the Fantasy Football Hub expected points. Howson of Bournemouth. They've got some tough fixtures to Bournemouth, but they do look strong. And then Milenkovic is up there as well. I would personally say, I think, I'd still have Milenkovic as my favourite Nottingham Forest defender because, well, he's just the best, I think, from an attacking perspective. But Neco Williams, I think he's down at 4.5 million, or towards the bottom end of that sort of cheap defender price category. I think he's probably nailed on that left side of the defence position now for Nottingham Forest. So he could be a potential option too, as could, to be fair, could Murillo. Although Murillo, he probably offers the least goal threat of all the Forest defenders, but he doesn't seem too bad for bonus. I would probably go for Milenkovic still, though, as my number 1 Forest defender. Moving on to midfielders, and right now, Fantasy Football Hub have Palmer ahead of Salah for expected points. 8.2 expected points for Palmer and 7.8 for Salah. Palmer playing Wolves at home, Salah playing Brentford away. Let me know in the comments what you think of that. Do you rank Salah or Palmer as the number 1 midfielder? De Bruyne in 3rd place, Ipswich away, good fixture for him. He put in a really good performance, to be fair, against Nottingham Forest. Look back to his very best. Bruno Fernandes, at the time that I'm recording this video, he hasn't played Southampton yet. I've got a little worry as a non-owner that he's actually going to go off in that game in Hull. And those that took a bit of a differential punt and captained him, I think you're going to be rewarded today. But we'll wait and see what happens in that game. Brighton at home is his fixture. That's a good fixture. Man United in general have really good fixtures coming up, to be fair. Foden off the back of his brace against Brentford. He's probably a case of don't buy, don't sell, just considering the turn of fixtures that Man City are about to go on. If you've got on his returns against Brentford, you'd be very happy. But, you know, Ipswich away is his only good remaining game. Then he's got Chelsea, and it gets really tough after that. I'd probably stick with Foden if I had him, but I'd be hard-pressed to buy him. Gordon is genuinely one of my favourite midfielders in the game. Newcastle in great form. Hasn't played Wolves, again, similar to Bruno Fernandes at the time that I'm recording this video. But I think regardless, you can consider Gordon, unless he gets injured in that game, to be a good option. Bournemouth at home is actually quite a tricky fixture, but I would say I'd back Newcastle at St James's Park against anyone. It's a little bit of a fortress for them. And then Eze with West Ham away. Again, haven't seen Crystal Palace play in 21, but I do like Eze as an option. Over the next 5 game weeks, that order between Salah and Palmer changes. Salah takes the lead, 15 expected points in game week 24. That's the highest expected points figure I've seen for a single game week this season. Well, I say single game week, you know what I mean. It's a double game week, but it's 1 game week in isolation. He's the top, obviously, with that double game week mixed in, and it's not even close. He's 11 expected points, basically, ahead of Palmer. Luis Diaz is up there. Honestly, though, for me, outside of Salah, I'm not sure I can be confident that any of the other players classed as midfielders or forwards in that Liverpool team will play both games of the double. It's just whether you want to take the risk of limited minutes across the double game week. You could go, to be honest, I don't think there's a whole lot to separate the likes of Diaz, Gakpo and Jota. Jota, maybe with his performance against Nottingham Forest coming off the bench to score, could have sort of put himself up in the pecking order a little bit. But again, I don't think for me that's enough to pick him. Obviously, you can see here, Fantasy Football Hub favours Luis Diaz. Let me know in the comments, actually, outside of Salah, who your favourite Liverpool midfielder is. De Bruyne, he's, well, looking back to his best, but I'm not sure, again, with those tough fixtures Man City have, it's the same story with Foden, really. They're kind of don't buy, don't sell, particularly for Game Week 21. And Bumo, yeah, didn't score against Man City, came really close to winning the game in the last minute. A goal line clearance from Ake prevented him from doing that. The fixtures, well, Liverpool up next, I know is relatively tough, but who's to say he couldn't score against Liverpool? And then the fixtures do get a lot better for him. I've just spoken about Bruno Fernandes. So similar to the defenders, that list we just looked at was kind of dominated by the more premium midfielders. So what I've got here is a list of cheap midfielders and their expected points for the next 5 game weeks. And the order goes as shows: Sarr, Semenyo, Ahmad, Rodgers, Iwobi, Elanga, and Jacob Murphy. I mentioned this in my buy and avoid video, right? I don't really have, outside of probably Rodgers as the number 1. I would always back Rodgers as the number 1, I think. And let me know if you disagree with that. But outside of that, I think you just pick one of these cheap midfielders and stick with them, because each of them will perform in their own respective game weeks. And you'll just be points chasing, I think, if you're looking to transfer one out because they didn't score to bring in another that did score. You'll find that the player you do bring in doesn't score and the player you sold does score. You just be playing hokey-cokey with these cheap midfielders. So my tactic, if I were to play, well, I've got 2 of them in my team. I've got, at the moment, Rodgers and Semenyo. And I've kept patience with Semenyo, which has really been paid off, because I could have just sold him. Seeing he's playing Chelsea, Bournemouth missing a number 9, I could have just sold him and he came away with a haul in Game Week 21. And it's those game weeks where you don't necessarily expect it and they score. That could be quite a common occurrence, I feel, with these cheap midfielders. So overall, I think you pick 1 or 2 and just stick with them. You know, stay the course and they will score points for you. Forwards then, no real surprise, I wouldn't say, to see Haaland number 1, Ipswich away, good fixture for him. Wood, 2nd place, Southampton at home. Oh, Chris Wood has more ownership now than Erling Haaland, which is, would you expect to say that at the start of the season? I'm not too sure. Isak in 3rd place, Bournemouth at home is a good fixture for him. I'm actually surprised he's not a little bit higher in terms of expected points. I think the fact that going into Game Week 21 he had his hamstring injury, that might be affecting his expected points total a little bit. If he starts Game Week 21 and comes through unscathed, no doubt in my mind he plays against Bournemouth and he's got a real chance of doing well. Cunha, despite a relatively tough fixture, just with the record he's got this season, is quite high up. Nicholas Jackson, I think at this point, if I had Jackson, I don't think I'd be selling him. You know, he got that assist in Game Week 21 against Bournemouth, and he could have had a lot more. I think he had 1.4 expected goal involvements in that game. He is doing enough in my mind that he's going to come good soon. And, well, he did. He got the assist in that game. I think if I had him, I'd probably stick with Jackson. Havertz, though, I'm not massive on Kai Havertz, I've got to say. I probably wouldn't have him. And then Raul Jimenez, given João Pedro's just uncertainty around his ankle, you know, the manager saying he's going to be managed, even if he does start in Game Week 21, I'd still be a little bit concerned with his minutes and just that ankle injury that's consistently been a problem this season. Raul Jimenez doesn't look like he has that issue. And I would also say I think Fulham is slightly better than Brighton, at least from an attacking perspective. So I would probably have Raul Jimenez in my team over João Pedro. One player that didn't make the list for Game Week 22, probably because he's got a tough game in Liverpool, is Wissa. I really like Wissa, and I think he'll probably appear on the top forwards for the next 5, or cheap ones when we get to the cheap ones, if we do. Haaland is top for the next 5, followed by Isak. Gakpo's up there. Again, that double game week for Liverpool is just massive for the expected points, because obviously it's one extra fixture over the next 5. It's 20%. What's that, right? 20% more games. Cunha, Wood, Solanke, Havertz is the order for forwards for the next 5. A player that didn't get a mention for 22 was Solanke. I really like Solanke. He is just going to be a steady Eddie if you have him in your team, I think. You just pick him, stick with him, and he can score in pretty much any game. Yeah, here we go for cheap forwards. So Cunha's top, 7 million. Wood, 6.9. And Wissa at 6.2 is 3rd place. In fact, just with the tough fixtures that Cunha has got coming up, I would probably rank Wissa ahead of Cunha. I'd have, in my personal ranking, going slightly against the grain with these expected points, I'd have Wood top, Wissa second, probably Cunha third, and Raul Jimenez fourth in terms of the top cheap forwards in the game. Let me know in the comments what your order of cheap forwards in the game would be. And yeah, this is what Fantasy Football Hub says. So that's the expected points done. We've got clean sheet odds for Game Week 22 here, according to 11ify. The top two teams are Arsenal. Arsenal have a 47% likelihood to keep a clean sheet against Aston Villa. That's an interesting one for me. I'm not sure I'd rank them quite that high. I wouldn't rule out a clean sheet in that game, I guess I would say, but I wouldn't quite put them at 47%. So it's interesting to see a model having them that high. Forest 44. For me, they're the most likely team with Southampton at home to keep a clean sheet. And then I always say teams 30% and above, I'd probably back to keep clean sheets. You got Fulham there on 30, Newcastle 28, Liverpool 29, United and Spurs on 27. Those 5 teams below Man City, I'd probably also back. I'd give a reasonable shout to keep a clean sheet. And finally, short discussion on captaincy, and it's really interesting. Both of the expected point sources that I would usually refer to on my videos have Palmer ahead of Salah for expected points for Game Week 22. It's a really interesting one. Again, I must say, I don't think it's quite as torn on captaincy as it was going into Game Week 21. You know, with Salah having such a tough fixture in Nottingham Forest away from home, I think that was probably the one game week in recent memory where there was a genuine case not to captain him. Like a really strong case not to captain him. I'm saying there's a genuine case here with Palmer arguably having a better fixture, but I just can't bring myself to go against Salah personally. So yeah, I'd probably say Salah is the best captain, but when you look at both sources of expected points data, Fantasy Football Hub and FPL Review, I always use FPL Review because I know how highly regarded it is around the community. They both have Salah at the moment ahead of Haaland. Oh, sorry, ahead of Salah and, well, Haaland's there as well. Again, as a Haaland owner, could I potentially captain him as a bit of a differential, despite it not going so well for me in Game Week 21? I don't know. For me, in my mind at the moment, the best captain is Salah. Again, there's lots of times I've asked you to let me know in the comments, but let me know in the comments who your favourite captain is. Alright, and that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed that and found it useful. If you did, please leave me a like rating on the video. I'd really appreciate that. Like I said, there's a few times I've told you to let me know things in the comments, so please do that. It'd be good to interact with you guys in the comments. And yeah, if you haven't already and you're new to this channel, please subscribe to the Golden Goal channel. It should be just there on your screen. That just leaves me to say thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you in my next video.